All right, so we have a question on Proverbs 22:6. Train up the child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they will not depart from it. Well, how do you explain that verse if you have people who really raise their children well and they do depart from that particular lifestyle? The answer to that is that the Proverbs are not meant to be law, but general principles. So the book of Proverbs will say, the sluggard will wind up in poverty, but the hard worker, the diligent worker, will wind up with extra in time of need. Well, that doesn't always happen. We all know people who are particularly lazy, but have wound up because of whatever circumstances. Someone dies and leaves them a big inheritance, or they make a couple of business decisions that in the end turn out really fantastic, even though they had very little forethought in them, and they're fairly lazy people. And we've also known people who work their fingers to the bone and yet can't seem to make ends meet. That doesn't mean that those broad principles always happen. Proverbs are intended to be, here's the general way life works. If you hang out with bad people, you're going to wind up being drug into it. If you marry someone who you think will make you rich, but that person is a really poor character, you're going to be miserable. And so these kinds of things are general, broad principles. It's not to say that they work 100% of the time or 99% of the time, but they're broad principles. Generally speaking, when a parent works hard to raise their child to be a follower of God, gracious towards other people, an honorable person who works hard, generally speaking, when that person becomes an adult, that's the kind of character you'll likely see in them. And the same is also true if you have parents that neglect their kids or don't work hard with their children to try to develop character in them, those children wind up low character kids. Doesn't always happen. We all know some kids that grew up in homes that were absolute train wrecks and the kid is spectacular. And we also know kids who've grown up in really, really good homes and they've made a train wreck of their lives. But we will also note that that is the exception, not norm. What we find is in adults that are troubled, many of them had troubled childhoods, and in adults that are incredibly successful, many of them had very, very good homes. The house often makes a huge difference in the outcome for that person when they reach adulthood. And so I think what we would say with Proverbs, what happens when that doesn't happen, is that these truths are intended to be broad principles that generally happen, and so that it not universal, just a broad application. So Proverbs are wisdom, daily living. How should I live my life? I should try to raise my child in a certain way, because when you do that, generally speaking, they grow up to be the way you've raised them. All right, good question. We'll see you guys Sunday night.